Boy, you catch your breath yet?
Oh man, that Dallas Washington game took it out of me. I mean, I feel like it punched me in the face. I can barely talk after that one.
I know. I think you were like, I think you puked out of disgust on the side. If I remember, we had to mute your mic.
Hey, it's tough being a Jaden Daniels owner, but it's a beautiful thing when it's all said and done.
It's not great when you have. I think he was at about like 7, 8 points in just like a standard league in the middle of the fourth quarter. Just there was you were thinking, why do I keep starting this guy? He hasn't been producing, and boom, like that in the flip.
Yeah, no, I mean he looked good running the ball. He's coming around, and it's one of those
Yeah,
things where it takes teams needing to score sometimes, and that
yeah.
route from Terry McLaurin, I mean, that was a pretty wild route. I don't think I've seen a guy just zig and zag in between three guys. Look like some
Is
math
Terry
play.
McLaurin that fast though? I didn't know he was that fast. He literally
He's
burnt
pretty fast.
everyone.
Yeah, he's a
Well,
pretty fast
that
guy.
that stamp of approval. That guy's fast.
Also seems like Dallas is a little slow. And it's end of the
Yeah.
game. Those guys defense is so much more gas than the offensive players. Like they just slipping and sliding. Not the best turf there in Washington either. The kind of
Did you
notorious
see the
turf.
kick? You remember the kicker's face after he misses the PAT? Like that's me when I don't start the right guy in my fantasy lineup. I'm just like this. I'm like, you gotta be kidding me. I'm just watching. How did he miss that PAT? I don't
Yeah, I
like that is
benched Jordan
brutal.
Addison in one league, so I was really wanting to just take a nap during that first game when he started going off. I was just like, what? Why? I've got half my team on buys and I still can't get this guy in my lineup. Well, what am I
I
doing?
know.
Like, oh, it's gonna be a tough week, and then it's Justin Jefferson that bums out and can't do anything
Crazy.
for the Vikings. Finally, a show up from Jordan Addison, blow up, really, not even just show up.
I know. Yeah, it's this week was kind of pretty awful matchups if you look at it on paper ahead of time. But some of these games, man, there were some fireworks. There were some high scoring affairs. Even like the Chiefs Panthers, they got down to the nitty gritty. Like the Cowboys Commanders was what 3-3 at halftime. It really toward the end, like it started to become this crazy last hour and a half of football. It was here's a play over here, here's a play over there. Even Denver versus the Raiders, like somehow the Raiders had a chance to tie the game at the end. Like it just felt like there's so much happening in the fourth quarters of all these games. It was a lot of fun.
There was one time where I think three teams scored touchdowns within 10 seconds of each other. It was just like bang, 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 like
Right.
slowing. It was hard for us to call all those touchdowns right away. It's like, wait, who? Producers, come on, give me too many touchdowns at once. Come on, one at a time, one at a
It
time.
also is like now people are scoring. You're like, who is this man? I have not seen him all year long.
Yeah, that'll happen this time of year too. And I mean, six
Yeah.
buys, who cares? Like that was as high a scoring fantasy week as I can remember on a
Yeah.
buy Mageddon. I mean, just you'd normally think, oh, the Bengals aren't playing, like we're in trouble. No, no
Right.
problem.
Yeah. It
Crazy.
was a. It definitely was. It felt like a low slate of games when, like to your point, it felt like you wanted to take a nap at the beginning of these games. Nothing was happening, but yeah, I mean, it felt like a full slate of games for sure. And I mean, 12 week 12 was tough, but week 14 is going to be brutal, I think. And like that's what all my friends are freaking out about. That's the week for most leagues are trying to get into the playoffs. And if you're right on the cusp, you better start looking at week 13 or week 14 right now, even though week 13's in front of
Right?
us. It's
No,
scary.
no buys in week 13. So really start checking for week 14, especially in
Yeah.
super flex. Like there's so many quarterbacks that you would want to start on bye week 14. It's brutal. And like you said, it's crunch time. You got to win games. Like it's now or never. I mean, there's a few leagues where I got to probably win the next 2 weeks or I'm going to be done. We'll see what happens tonight. Praying Saquon can pull through for me tonight, but I mean, it's a rough slate out there.
Probably
Luckily,
not.
Saquon's been balling out this year, so hopefully you keep rolling. And those 1 yard touchdowns from Jalen Hurts are just brutal. Like
I know.
give Saquon the ball. Like I feel like he's got to house one from 60 just to get his points.
Yeah, we'll see. The Rams are not that bad of a team. I don't know if Saquon cools down, but we'll see. I feel like you have a good feeling about him. I probably feel, lukewarm. We'll see what happens tonight. I'm
Yeah,
sure
good
he'll
week for
have
the
an okay.
Seahawks too. Seahawks pulled out a big win versus
Yeah,
Arizona. The rest of the division so far is lost, so it's about
that
all they know.
division that division has become the NFC South almost. It's like it's everyone's beating up on each other. You don't like the teams are the best team is the San Francisco one week, the best team Seattle one week, best teams Arizona one week, the best teams the Rams. It's kind of a bizarre division, but
Nine
someone
wins.
said it this week. What's that?
Oh, I think 9 wins could win either of those divisions, possibly.
Exactly. Exactly. And like I think San Francisco's broken from just being so close so many years in a row. They're broken physically because they have so many people hurt. And when's the last time you saw Christian McCaffrey lose a fumble? I've not seen that in so long. I just think that there's something that it's just emotionally a big toll for a team to continue to get that close and not make it.
Well, and we've seen that historically. The team that loses the
Yeah.
Super Bowl has a really hard time making the playoffs the following year. When if you win the Super Bowl, you kind of like ride that high straight into the playoffs. So, hopefully somebody can knock off the Chiefs and they can finally feel that sour taste. 'Cause they don't really look like a Super Bowl team to me this year, but
No.
you know, you never know. They haven't looked like a Super Bowl team some of these other years, and they went on to
Yeah.
win it. So
Yeah, we'll see what happens. One last thing with the 2 weeks left before the playoffs in traditional leagues, are you worried about teams tanking? There's so many bad teams this year that there could be some issues with scoring or people not playing toward the end. You have any worries so far about it?
I got some worries about some fantasy teams tanking in my dynasty leagues. That's for sure. There's one guy in particular. I'm not going to call RJ out by name, but
Yeah.
RJ should stop tanking. That's just kind of one of those things.
Well, I
It's
play
like,
RJ. I play RJ the last week before the playoffs, so I mean, I don't know. It seems pretty nice.
he's going to be locked in with the number one pick at that point. Why tank if you're locked in at number one? But it's one of those things that just keeps on keeping on. But I think the NFL, it's tough. I mean, why would you want to win if you're one of the 5 to 7 teams that are buying for that number one pick, and
Sure.
one win is going to knock you from the first overall pick to possibly the seventh, eighth pick, and that's in every round. So, that's going to knock you back, if you want a quarterback, especially. I think that some of these teams, the Jaguars, like, who cares if you win a game? You're not going to go out and draft a quarterback. You've locked up
Sure.
Trevor Lawrence for way too long, so they're probably not going to draft a quarterback. Carolina, Indianapolis probably have to give it another year before you draft a quarterback. But some of these other teams up there, Las Vegas, the Giants, they're taking quarterbacks, so why would you want anything better than DeVito
Yeah,
at quarterback? And you might as well
for
be
sure.
Danny DeVito out there. That's what
I
Tommy Cutlets
honestly,
looks like.
that's
Like,
what that's what Malik Neighbors thinks is out there at this point. So he's pretty pissed.
it's one of those things where it's pretty bad situation. The Giants definitely need a quarterback. There's enough teams that need a quarterback. And the other thing is there's no good teams that need a quarterback next year besides the Steelers. So these
Yeah,
quarterbacks that aren't going back to their team, Russell Wilson, if he doesn't get that job, where's he going to land? Aaron Rodgers, if he's not back with the Jets, like, unless he's in Pittsburgh, I mean, who's what? I mean, maybe he signs as a starter for 5 6 weeks. I mean, I don't see him signing to be a backup. That's for sure.
that's the problem. That's when you name like Tommy DeVito, that impacts Malik Neighbors. That impacts actual players. So definitely something to be worried about and kind of monitor, especially maybe not week 14, but maybe week 15. Definitely week 16.
Yeah, it's been hard for people to readjust. Malik Neighbors looked
Yeah,
so good those first
so
few
good.
weeks that everybody's like, he's lock it in, got to start him. I don't think that's his body of work over the course of the season.
Yeah,
Like, I think he's
I agree.
really profiled more as a wide receiver 3 or a flex because it's just such bad quarterback play. I mean, and he really just
Yeah,
hasn't looked the same since the concussion. I think he's more of a put him on your bench and wait at this point. Like, I've got a
yeah,
couple of leagues where it's like him or Terry McLaurin. It's like, Terry McLaurin hasn't looked amazing, but at the same time, he's playing a lot better.
Yeah, I mean, one thing is just opportunities, right? Malik Neighbors is not even getting opportunities at this point. At least a player like Terry McLaurin, whether it's 1 minute left in the fourth quarter, he's getting opportunities, So that's definitely
Yeah, he had a slow week up
difference.
until that
Yeah, yeah,
prayer Mary. I mean, it's not even like it's too far to even throw a Hail Mary. I don't know how
yeah,
weaving in and out of traffic like he's playing
crazy.
Frogger or something. I mean, it's just
Yeah,
wild looking play there to finish it off. And we already started talking about some of these studs, but Jordan
yeah,
Addison went off for
yeah.
8 for 162 and a touchdown. I mean, a lot of people had to start him this week because of buys, and then normally would have had him on the bench. So shout out to all those guys. I mean, that's a huge, huge win for those managers. And Jalen Waddle, another guy that probably hadn't been starting for you lately, but if you had to start him this week, 8 for 144 and a touchdown. Thank you very much, Jalen Waddle.
Tua Tagovailoa looking sharp right now. Has had 3 touchdowns, 4 touchdowns last couple of games. This is what you want if you. This is what everyone was hoping for at the beginning of the year with the Miami offense, and obviously the concussions. So we'll see if it keeps going. There's a lot of mouths to feed there. Johnny Smith was one of those guys too. 9 receptions, 87 yards, and a touchdown. That offense can feed. It's just can Tua do it week in and week out.
Yeah, and how many people can he feed? Because obviously Tyreek
Devon
ended up
Achane,
being the low man on the totem pole
yeah,
this week, not quite getting what he was hoping for. But I mean, the wide receiver threes just went off this week. Cortland Sutton, 8 for 97, 2 touchdowns. Like, don't see that coming. Nico Collins looking like he's back. Finally, it took him a little bit, but 5 for 92 and a touchdown. DJ Moore, another guy that had kind of slipped into that wide receiver 3 territory, finally getting over the 100-yard mark, 7 for 106 and a touchdown. It's a really nice week for, people who are playing guys at their flex or low end starters that, kind of got pressed into service.
Yeah, I think with Cortland Sutton, I do think of those that we've named outside of Nico Collins, obviously, I think Cortland Sutton is a huge beneficiary of Bo Nix really just thriving in that offense now. He's throwing it over the top for Cortland Sutton. He's really trusting him now. And I think Cortland Sutton's the type of wide receiver that's going to be a solid wide receiver too throughout the playoffs for you. That is a guy that you probably drafted late, and now he's really paying off late in the season. He's a guy that has been a huge help on many teams.
Could have even been a waiver wire ad. I mean, there was a
Yeah.
couple of weeks, where he didn't show up and people were sick of it, and Bo Nix hadn't quite started clicking yet. So, it's nice to see Sam Darnold, Patrick Mahomes bouncing back. Darnold 330 and 2, Mahomes 269 and 3. So Mahomes finally getting going. Who thought that it would be superstar tight end Noah Gray to get him going?
Yeah, no, Noah Gray looked really good. It was so funny. When we're watching the game, I see a touchdown. It's a white guy, tight end looking dude with an 8 on his jersey. I was like, oh, Travis Kelce's back, and it's Noah Gray. It really does look like what Travis Kelce was doing, a couple years ago, what Noah Gray did against the Panthers. And like you said, you've been talking about it multiple weeks in a row. That certainly seems to be happening in front of our eyes as we speak too.
Yeah, Travis Kelce's aging faster than we can blink. I think this really is going to be his last ride.
Yeah.
So make sure and grab Noah Gray if you can in Dynasty. And another tight end going off, Trey McBride doesn't get in the end zone, but 12 for 133. I mean, this is why you drafted this guy. You thought this was something possible, and not the best game for the Cardinals overall. Seahawks really shut them down. For the majority of the game, but Trey McBride was still able to get his big game for him.
Yeah, and we talk about running backs as well. Jahmyr Gibbs, huge game, breaking off some big runs. Aaron Jones, if you're an Aaron Jones owner, that was a massive game, almost a sigh of relief because you saw Cam Akers kind of coming in. Even early in the game when he fumbled on the goal line, I thought it was over. I was like, it's Cam Akers' time. It's gonna be tough for them. He's fumbled multiple times in the last couple of weeks, but Aaron, they stuck with him. He had a great game, huge touchdown, another goal line opportunity, and you really need to see it from Aaron Jones. And then now Bucky Irving had a huge game. Obviously, anyone on the Bucks had a huge game at this point because they were playing the Giants. But do you think Bucky Irving is a guy you can ride out for the rest of the season? I mean, they don't play the Giants every week. That run game has been pretty strong, but Baker's also that main piece of that puzzle. What do you think about Bucky Irving?
Yeah, all
Forward?
three running backs got in the end zone this week.
Yeah.
Rashad White got a touchdown. Tucker got a touchdown. It looked like Tucker was going to take over the goal line role, and then he
Yeah.
fumbled. And they were like, no. All right, we're not
Back to
gonna mess
Bucky.
with that too much again. We got some important games coming up. Not next week though, because they got the Carolina Panthers. And so, yeah, I mean, I think Bucky's really a low end RB2, a high end flex at this point of the year. I definitely would want to start him over a guy like Ramondre Stevenson, only had 13 rushing yards this week. Tyrone Tracy, another guy that had kind of been anointed as a RB2, and it's like, I don't know. 42 yards and a fumble for Tracy. I mean, he's a good receiver, but it takes the right matchup for a lot of these guys that just aren't those high-end guys. And Bucky probably going to be a little bit more matchup-based, but also added in a nice game receiving. I think he had 6 for 64. So that's a solid RB2. And really, he'd be an RB1 if Rashad White wasn't there. I mean, he really has the skill set. If you have him in Dynasty, you're excited for what the next few years. It might take a few years before White's gone, but when he really has control of that role, he's a great receiver, but he's also kind of a power back. I mean, I can't think of a guy that really had that kind of power and receiving chops in quite some time. Kind of like he's not nearly as big as Steven Jackson, but that was kind of Steven Jackson of old, a guy who could be a power back, but also was very good with his hands, making nice catches. David Johnson, another guy that was kind of similar, wasn't as much of a power back, but had that size to get it done and would be considered a power back in today's NFL. So, Bucky's a guy that I would want to start. I would have no problem starting him. And if you got him off waivers or late in the draft, you got to be excited to have him there for this stretch run because it's going to be important. Guys like him could be make or break come fantasy playoffs.
Yeah, and look, like you said, Bucks are playing important games. They are in the hunt right now, and a team like the Giants are not. So
thanks to the Falcons,
how much
the Bucks record could easily be out of the playoffs, but the division is still available.
Yeah. I love that historically it's just a bad division. No matter what year, no matter the star power, no matter who's doing what, it's still always like, oh, they're barely going to hit 500.
Even the Saints are still in it, and the same thing in the NFC West. Every single team is going to be in it probably for the entire season because no team has any interest in running away with it. I mean, they all are 500 mediocre teams basically, and it just is kind of going to depend on how they play down the stretch, who gets in, and you never know. Those games, a lot of times, those end up being the teams that can either go on a run in the postseason or at least pull off that first round upset because they're going to get that home game too.
Yeah, I blame the NFC North for beating up on everyone. They've been outside the Bears, been unbelievable in that division.
And the AFC, the AFC has been kind of taking it to the NFC this year a little bit.
That's fair as well.
A little bit better for the season.
A lot of running backs on our duds list today. We were watching. We named some good ones. Bucky Irving, Aaron Jones, but a lot of duds. Who on this list? If I'm trying to make this playoff running back, or, playoff run, who are you most worried about? Is it a Jonathan Taylor, a Joe Mixon, or is it the Tyrone Tracy, as you mentioned, or Ramondre Stevenson? I know Christian McCaffrey, had a bad game. We talked about it early. My gut says he could probably bounce back. That team is pretty bad right now and banged up, but there's some big names there that people have been relying on most of the season.
No, it is a great question because we got Tyrone Tracy, Ramondre Stevenson, McCaffrey only had 31 yards, had the fumble. Joe Mixon only 22 yards on 14 carries. I mean, yikes.
That's not good.
James Conner kind of salvages it with 5 catches for 41 yards, but 7 carries.
Those are on the end.
And I mean, Jonathan Taylor, 11 for 35. I'm going to say, Ramondre and Tracy, as bad as they've looked, I'm not as worried because I don't think they're anchors to your team. I think you're going to be able to find another player to put in. I think you are kind of like having a luxury of playing those guys as your flex or RB2. So I don't think they're necessarily going to be there. Mixon has been so good this year. I think it's hard to say like, oh, one bad game, forget this guy. Like I think,
Mm.
he's going to have better days ahead. So it's really McCaffrey, James Conner, and Jonathan Taylor that I'm most worried about. And Conner and McCaffrey, I think it comes down to health, and they've just had injury problems either historically or this year. And Jonathan Taylor, I think probably is going to have to be the most concerning because I don't see something out there to right the ship. Like we saw him a few years ago be that stud number one overall running back, but he doesn't quite have that same speed. He's never been a power back. He's never been super elusive.
Yeah.
So now I'm like, well, wait a minute. Like if he's not getting 20 carries, if he's not in an offense that's getting the ball near the goal line, he's got to, with Joe Flacco in there, it was like, okay, they get down in the red zone, goal line, he's going to punch that in. Well, now with Anthony Richardson, I don't think he's getting that goal line work. He's not getting those dump off passes because Anthony Richardson is going to hit your cleats with a dump off pass. So I think
Right.
Jonathan Taylor is one of these guys that you thought you were getting an RB1 and you really got more of a flex back. And I just wouldn't be shocked if people were benching him. To be honest, like I think it'd be hard to be in the playoff hunt if he's not in your starting lineup. But maybe you got lucky. You got a guy like Bucky Irving. Probably going to start Bucky
So
Irving over Jonathan Taylor. I mean, you got to look at the matchups, obviously, but I just don't see the upside for Taylor that Bucky has. If Bucky's got that TD upside, the receiving upside, I mean, that's what you need. They need to have at least one of them. If they don't have either of it, makes it real hard to start him, especially during this super important crunch time of the season.
do you think Anthony Richardson knows that he throws the ball straight into the ground all the time? Is it because he's like too tall for a quarter? Like he's like throwing it straight into the ground every time, and he has a cannon of an arm. It makes
Too
zero
strong.
sense. It's
I think
he's
that's
too straight. He's
too
the
strong.
ball, no,
It's like
no trajectory.
it's like I think some of those Patrick Mahomes passes would be better. The little
Yeah,
underhand, like
it's
you just
yeah,
like toss it the underhand, maybe like
yeah,
the left-handed pitch, just like underhand, like granny style it, just like
right.
throw it forward when it's that short of a pass, like trying to just stand there. Yeah, like that's 80-mile-per-hour fastball doesn't work on a 5-yard pass, so
Yeah,
he's got to
that's a
vary
tough
up. I mean, in some ways those are really tough. So you almost have to throw it as either like a slider or a changeup,
Sure.
and so some quarterbacks throw it almost too soft, and it's like,
Yeah,
you see the D
holding
lineman that
forever.
jumps it and
Yeah,
picks it off, or the
yeah,
linebacker that's
yeah,
just sitting there. I'm trying to think who really throws those because Lamar Jackson struggles with that throw too. Like
yeah.
it's
That's a good
not
point.
something that's limited, to Anthony Richardson. There's a lot of quarterbacks that have really good arms, really good deep ball that don't throw a good short pass. And I can't think of a better example right now. I'm sure there is one, but Russell Wilson is probably
Yeah,
the guy that you look at that just is really able to change speeds and bury up his passes. He doesn't necessarily throw the bullets, but those he has a different pass for his deep ball is aired up as deep as it can be. His intermediate's got a little bit of loft on it, and his short ones just kind of, not too hard, not too soft, like just kind of
yeah.
tossing it in there, making sure they can catch it. And the guy who really probably throws the best of these balls, but sometimes they're dangerous, is Tua. I mean, Tua will just zip them in there, and the guys will just snag the ball out of nowhere.
Yeah,
But he's got the right feel for it, So it's just
yeah.
you really have to if you want to throw it hard, you got to hit them just deadly accurate. It's got to be in the absolute
Right in
right
the hands.
spot,
Yeah,
or you can just throw it in the vicinity soft. And especially knowing the situation, there's so many times where you'll see a quarterback try to dump a ball down, and there's nobody anywhere around them, and they miss the
right.
throw. And it's like
I know.
you really just had to just get it somewhere close, like put a little extra air underneath that, make sure he can catch it, even if it's behind it. These guys nowadays, they can catch stuff with one arm, one
One
hand, three
finger.
fingers, like behind the back, like there all sorts of
Totally.
stuff with these sticky gloves. So I think you just got to give them a chance a lot of times with those. But
That's
Richardson,
that's the
that's
thing. I think
definitely
I think with Anthony
Kill
Richardson, it is playing time. We've talked about this. That's a clear like playing time because when I watch those games, there are some wide open guys, and he's throwing it way too hard in the ground. And back to our point with Jonathan Taylor, I just think you're going to lose your carries with Anthony Richardson, and you're going to lose a flow of the offense, and they're going to ride it out. Like you got to get him reps and everything in there. So I think I'm most worried about him. And with Christian McCaffrey, he just doesn't look the same. That if I were to put it 1A and 1B, Christian McCaffrey just hasn't looked the same since he's come back. You want to talk about draft equity like you had with Jonathan Taylor, number 1 or 2 or 3 pick, top 3, consensus, I'd say number 1, probably most popular. You've been waiting for 10 weeks for this. This is really tough to swallow right now if you're a Christian McCaffrey owner. So I'm not
But you also
worried.
survived 10 weeks without him. So,
Right.
it's like,
It's
I mean, I
true.
guess
That
if
helps.
it was because you had Jordan Mason in there, you're like, wait, this kind of isn't even what
No.
I was getting better production from Jordan Mason.
Right.
This is ridiculous. So you
Yeah.
expect to see it at least from him as a receiver, but it's so hard going that much time off because there's a lot of injury. Like if he had broke his hand or his arm or something, let's
He can
say,
still work out. Yeah.
he'd been running all the way through. Like, maybe he's going to have, not as much arm strength, but with the Achilles tendonitis, like I don't know how much running you're really able to do, especially that football running, like
The
attacking
stamina, right?
hills, tucking. I mean, how many squats are you able to do with your messed up Achilles, right?
I've been
Like,
there 1, and I have 2 working Achilles.
right? If you take 6 months off of squats, you're not going back to 500 pounds. You got to
Right, right.
reset back at 300 or whatever it is. So I think it just really makes it tough on these guys. And so, I mean, I think it's tough if you got any of these guys, to be honest. But McCaffrey's one of those guys that you're going to keep starting. You got
No,
this
right.
far. It's like
Uh,
Jonathan Taylor. Like I could see justifying putting somebody else in. Christian McCaffrey. It's like if you're not starting him, why are you even playing fantasy football? It's like that's why you have him is because you thought he was going to be the best player each and every week, and it might not be happening, but then you finally bench him, and that's the week he goes off for 3 touchdowns and 100 yards receiving.
yeah, you'd rather it's all that guy is worth a chance for sure because the ceiling is so high with him. The ceiling's been there for years. There's a lot of data to back you up to be like this guy can explode. Real quick, a couple more bums. We have Brock Bowers, who I'm worried because Aiden McConnell's going to come in. I don't know what the chemistry is like there. Gardner Minshew went out. I know he had a bad game, but you could do it one off if it was still Gardner. And then Sam Laporta. Do you drop Sam Laporta if you need a tight end at this point? I would almost say if you need the spot, I might do it. He just hasn't been productive. I mean, 3 for 19 for this
I
guy, that's crazy to me.
probably give you credit for hanging on to him this long, to be honest. I mean, it's like with the other, I mean, especially, if Jonnu Smith is out there, if
Yeah, go get those
Taysom
guys.
Hill is out there. There's just he hasn't shown any of the upside. Like the targets haven't been there, everything hasn't been there. And I kind of go back to him having a sprained ankle early in the season and then deciding to play through it. I think it just is never correctly healed. He's going to be a guy that I'm targeting late in drafts next year. Like I really think that they forced him to play on an injury, which makes absolutely no sense with how good the Lions have been all season. Like you
They're so
really could have
good.
sat him down. Like if you were going to tell me the Lions were going to lead the league in scoring and Sam Laporta wasn't going to be a top 10 tight end, top
Yeah.
12 tight end before the season,
Yeah.
I would have said, "Oh, he broke his ankle, like so he's on IR." Like how he's played every game and he's not a top 12 tight end is just mind-boggling. I mean, in some
Yeah.
ways maybe it's they don't need him. Maybe he shows up during the playoffs, maybe it's something else. I don't really know. I mean, maybe if all of the offensive line touches went to him, he'd be having a top 10 season, with the way they're messing around with their trick plays and shenanigans like that. But some of Laporta's production last year was unsustainable. It was mostly touchdowns,
Sure.
whereas Brock Bowers is about to set the record for receiving yards and receptions for
Right.
a tight end. So
Yeah.
I wouldn't
Who
worry
else are
about
you throwing in on
having
that
a
team?
down week. Whoever's playing quarterback, if they don't throw to Brock Bowers, they're going to put some other bum in there. Whether it's
Sure.
Desmond Ritter, Aiden O'Connell, Daniel Jones off the street. Who knows who's. I mean, it sounds like Daniel doesn't want to go there, but I think we're just
I
hearing
get it.
Minshew broke his collarbone, so
Yeah.
he's done
Oh,
for the year. So
oof.
rough break for him,
Yeah,
literally and figuratively. So
I
hopefully
know.
we'll see him as a starter again. He's got a knack for choosing the best possible backup situation. Like maybe he goes
Always.
back to Jacksonville and like something happens to Trevor Lawrence, like wherever he goes, he's going to get some more stars. We haven't seen the end of him, but
I
for
hope
now,
not.
it's Bowers
Although, if you're
bust.
the GM, you're like, don't come to my team. I don't want our starting quarterback to go down.
He's bad luck in that regard.
Yeah.
Yeah. Well,
Yeah.
he's been a solid fill. And Tyreek Hill had the down week. Jaden Reed had a down week. Not worried about those guys. They're big parts of the
Yeah.
offense. Jaden Reed, I think he's kind of in a down low, but he's so apt to blow up. Like
Yeah.
it's hard to find a better flex start. If you're looking for high end points. What about
Especially if you're especially with your Christian Watson when you're dropping touchdown passes, like I'd be so frustrated as a quarterback and a team.
Yeah, he's all of the Green Bay receivers, like if they were combined into one, it would be a superstar
Amazing.
receiver. But all of these guys, they either are lacking the hands, the size, the speed.
Yeah.
Like it doesn't all.
Durability. Yeah.
They refuse to draft them in the first round. They're like, no, 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 we're really good at finding receivers in the
We'll
second,
find
third,
Jordy
fourth,
Nelson again.
fifth round. Yeah, and it's like, as great as Jordy was, he never had the speed to
Right.
be,
Right.
I mean, somehow he produced like an elite receiver, but I think that was
Right.
more Aaron Rodgers being the best quarterback in the
Pretty
game
good.
when he
Yeah.
was
Yeah.
there.
He was pretty
And
good.
it was just, I mean, Jordy was great. I mean, he was fun. That was a fun time, like,
Yeah.
you know, but few and far between. Let's get some dynasty players that we should add. Trade deadlines have probably passed. Maybe they haven't, but Jeremy McNichols, go ahead and add him. Saw at the end of that game, Austin Eckler, a great kick return, take one for the team, and just gets blown up, concussed, not likely to play after a concussion.
Yeah.
Guys have been sitting out for a little bit. And Brian Robinson was in and out of that game too with an ankle injury, ended up getting ruled out. You never know with an ankle how
Sure.
long that's going to happen. Drew Lock, I think there's a chance he takes over that Giants job. I mean, maybe not if they really are trying to tank, but if they're trying to win, it's not Tommy Cutlets. And Desmond Ritter, I think he's got as good a shot as Aiden O'Connell being the starter for the Raiders. There's not anything there with Aiden O'Connell for the future. You might as well give Ritter a shot, see what he's got, see if he's
Sure.
worth holding on to.
Yeah. I don't know if you're Drew Lock and Trey Lance, are you texting each other? I'm like, why do they hate us? Aren't we the second string quarterbacks? Why do they not want us to play? Weren't we here to be the backup? It's very bizarre the Cowboys. I
They're
get super
trying to
frustrated
sign
a
him
lot
for
better.
cheap next year, right? They're like,
Exactly. They're like setting it up like to be like, stay, don't
all
be
right,
too
we'll,
good.
we'll give you a 4-year, $12 million contract. Like,
Yeah, that's
you
the
know,
best you'll get. Yeah,
they
it's
look
true.
good.
And then
They look good in 2 or 3 games. They're going to get $5 million a year. So it's like
right.
that's a lot of money for a couple of wins you don't want.
Yeah, we talked about for me, I have a couple. Noah Gray, even in dynasty leagues, he's about 50% owned. I think it's time to, if not this year, have him ready for next year, and then Geoff with a G can make fun of me and say, "Haha, I told you so." And then Aiden O'Connell, I'm going with the coin flip. Aiden O'Connell, and why don't you go pick him up, see who they take, because that franchise is in a mess. If you need a potential super flex, and if you're looking toward the Jets, maybe get the backup quarterback there if you're that desperate. I don't know what's going to happen to Aaron Rodgers, but it just seems that there could be a
Tyrod
potential
Taylor,
that yeah,
you talk
Tyrod
about
Taylor.
grab Tyrod, yeah.
Yeah, I just think there's a chance that Aaron Rodgers may not play the rest of the season.
Yeah, the reports coming out they might cut him before the end of the year. I mean, things gone
Crazy.
from bad to worse. The reports of how players were getting management was getting fired from the Jets. I mean, it comes back to a theme that we've talked about time and time again. Bad ownership is going to leave you with a bad product on the field. It starts at the top, and if the owner isn't
Mhm.
trusting the people he puts in charge to do their job, then the whole organization is going to suffer. You've got to be well run top to
Yeah.
bottom to be consistent. And that's what it takes to be a franchise that's fighting for the playoffs every year is consistent ownership that's
Yeah.
not going to just waver and say, oh, we had a bad week. You're gone. You're losing your job. No, That's why you brought them in. You've got to stick by your offseason decisions. And really, you shouldn't make changes during the season. As bad as it goes, you got to just ride it out. That's one credit I'll give Jerry Jones with the Cowboys this year. Everybody knows Mike McCarthy's not coming back, but at the same time, he's letting him finish out his contract, giving him the respect, and making sure that when he goes to hire the next coach, that coach isn't going to say, I don't want to coach here. I'm going to get fired midseason. Hey, he knows at least he's going to honor his contract and let him coach it out.
Yeah, that's a good point. I thought you were going to say don't go into business with your friends because it's messy as hell. I thought that's what you're going to say about Aaron Rodgers, but both ring
Hey,
true.
it all depends on what business you're doing. I think
True.
some of those guys are doing just fine. Those comedians signing each other to deals, doing the podcast together.
That's
You
true.
know, just depends on what you're doing. But in NFL, it's
Probably
it's
not.
a dirty.
Yeah,
It's
probably
a
not the
little
NFL.
bit more competitive than this podcast space. I mean,
Yeah, for sure.
maybe someday they'll sign us to do a podcast in addition to this live show, but we'll see.
I hope so.
We still gotta. I mean, I guess maybe this is considered a podcast. These people are just recording us and then posting it without our consent. So
I know.
I guess
I know.
that's
We're
isn't that's
still trying
kind
to
of
figure
a
it out.
podcast. I don't really know how that works. So what sphere is that? Live TV that wasn't supposed to be live? It's I don't
Sounds
know.
like TMZ.
Yeah. Is it TMZ's paying for this? Yeah. They
Yeah,
they want
yeah.
our
This is the
goods.
good stuff.
We're TMZ content these days. Yeah, I don't know if we're quite there, but I wouldn't mind that. TMZ has the scoop on when our next show is going to air.
They're always right. It's crazy. All right. It looks like we can get the fuck out of here. So what a week. Can week 13 do the same with Thanksgiving? We'll see.
Oh,
Happy
hope
Thanksgiving,
not.
brother.
Happy Thanksgiving to you.